The rain had just begun to fall when the security doors of the glass tower slid open. With a sharp mechanical hiss, people inside barely noticed. For them, it was just another business day, another meeting, another contract, another step up the ladder. But for Elijah Carter, that sound felt like a verdict being read out loud. He stepped out slowly, shoulders slumped, holding a single white paper in his right hand. It trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of what it represented: termination. Not because of poor performance, not because of a mistake, but because someone powerful decided he no longer belonged. Elijah had worked in that building for 7 years. 7 years of arriving early, leaving late, skipping lunches, missing birthdays, and swallowing insults disguised as jokes. He had started in maintenance, worked his way up through sheer discipline, and earned the respect of everyone who actually worked beside him. Everyone except one man, Victor Langford, the billionaire owner of Langford Global Solutions, a man whose name alone opened doors, a man who never learned the names of people who cleaned those doors. From the moment Victor noticed Elijah, noticed his confidence, his intelligence, the way people listened when he spoke, something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was quiet resentment, because Elijah wasn't supposed to stand out. That morning, Elijah had been summoned to the top floor. No warning, no explanation, just an email marked urgent. When he entered the office, Victor Langford didn't even look up. "You're done here," Victor said flatly, sliding the paper across the desk. Elijah blinked. "Sir, I don't understand." Victor finally raised his eyes, cold and dismissive. "You don't fit the image we're moving toward." "What image?" Elijah asked, heart pounding. Victor stood up then, adjusting his suit, towering over him, not in height but in ego. "Security," Victor snapped. That was it, no discussion. No chance to defend himself, no dignity. Now as Elijah walked away from the building, rain soaking into his worn shoes, memories crashed over him like waves. His mother working 2 jobs. His promise to her that he would make something of himself. The nights he slept in his car before this job gave him stability. And now, gone. Behind him, heels clicked sharply against the concrete. "Elijah, don't you walk away like that." He didn't turn around, but he recognized the voice. Margaret Sloan, Victor's executive assistant, the woman who enforced his cruelty with a smile. "You were warned," she shouted. "You should have known your place." That sentence cut deeper than the termination paper ever could. Elijah clenched his jaw. He kept walking, because if he turned around, he wasn't sure he could hold himself together. The people passing by stared. Some whispered. Some looked away. No one intervened. That's how it always was. But what none of them knew, what Victor Langford himself didn't know, was that Elijah Carter was carrying far more than a piece of paper. He was carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy an empire, and destiny had a way of bringing truth to light. Across town, inside a modest apartment, an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair, staring at the news on a small television. When she heard the company name mentioned, her hands began to shake. Langford Global Solutions. Her eyes filled with tears. "Lord," she whispered, "please protect that boy." Because she knew something no one else did. Elijah Carter wasn't just another employee. He was the reason Langford Global existed at all. And very soon the world was going to find out. Victor Langford believed power made a man untouchable. That belief followed him everywhere, into boardrooms, private jets, charity galas, and exclusive clubs where men like him toasted to success while never asking who paid the real price for it. By the time the news alert buzzed on his phone that afternoon, he was seated comfortably at a rooftop restaurant, sipping imported whiskey and laughing with investors. The headline barely registered at first. "Whistleblower documents linked to Langford Global under federal review." Victor scoffed and locked his phone. "Fear tactics," he said casually. "Happens every quarter." But across the city, Elijah Carter stood in the rain outside a public library, staring at the same headline on a cracked screen. His breath caught. Because he knew those documents. He had found them by accident 3 years ago, buried deep inside maintenance, archives while repairing, a flooded server room late one night, contracts rerouted, shell companies, illegal asset seizures, a name repeated again and again at the center of it all. Langford Global hadn't been built from genius. It had been built from theft. Elijah could have exposed it back then. But he didn't, not because he was afraid, but because the final piece was missing until now. Inside, his jacket pocket was a flash drive, handed to him that morning by a trembling intern, who whispered, "They tried to erase this. I think you should have it. It contained everything. Signatures, audio recordings, financial trails leading directly to Victor Langford, and one final file titled simply, Origin." Elijah opened it. The document told a story Victor had spent decades burying. Langford Global's first capital hadn't come from investors or innovation, but from a black-owned construction company that mysteriously collapsed. After a hostile takeover, its founder had died. Weeks later, in what was ruled an accident, that founder's name, James Carter, Elijah's father, the rain stopped. The world went silent. At that moment, Elijah understood something terrifying and powerful. Victor Langford hadn't just fired him, he had erased him. Again, the next morning, the world woke up to chaos. Federal agents stormed Langford Global headquarters before the opening bell. News helicopters hovered overhead. Employees were escorted out. Servers seized. Accounts frozen. Victor watched it unfold. From his penthouse television, his face drained of color. "This is a mistake," he muttered. Then the doorbell rang. When Victor opened the door, he didn't find lawyers or assistants. He found Elijah Carter, calm, steady, unafraid. "You," Victor sneered. "You have nerve showing up here." Elijah met his eyes. "You took everything from my father. Then you took my job. Now I'm taking the truth back." Victor laughed, sharp and desperate. "You think anyone will believe you?" Elijah held up the flash drive. "They already do." The next hours shattered Victor's world. News outlets played leaked audio recordings live on air. Victor, too, bragging about acquisitions, laughing about ruined families, mocking the people he destroyed. Investors fled. Stocks collapsed. Board members resigned. And then came the final blow. At a press conference broadcast worldwide, Elijah stood at the podium. "I was fired yesterday," he said calmly. "But this isn't about my job. It's about justice. Langford Global was built on stolen work, stolen lives, and stolen futures, including my father's." Gasps echoed across the room. Victor watched from his darkened penthouse as the world learned his truth. The mighty billionaire, the untouchable king, was exposed. That evening, as police led Victor Langford out in handcuffs, cameras flashing, Elijah stood across the street among the crowd, not smiling, not celebrating, just breathing, because for the first time in his life, the weight was gone. Weeks later, Elijah stood before a restored company, rebuilt, renamed, and placed into a public trust. Jobs were returned, families compensated, history corrected. A reporter asked him, "What do you want people to remember about this?" Elijah paused. "That no one is invisible," he said, "and no matter how powerful someone looks, truth always catches up."